software computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Alright, first things first. Make sure captions are on. They are. Let's see how this light looks before we move on anywhere. Oh, that orange does absolutely fucking nothing. Okay, we won't use orange then. I tried. Hell. We'll do blue. I thought the orange might be fun for Firestarter, but the orange doesn't catch well on camera, so we will not use it. Hello everyone, welcome to book club number 2. We are very excited. I built a chair today. This is a much more comfortable chair, so I can be nice and relaxed as we sit and break stuff down tonight. So, go through the quick hellos. I saw Sentinel is going to be in the car, but will join when he can. Of course, that is fine. We will be happy to have him when he arrives. Very nice chair, thank you. Welcome in Aya Apocalypse, as per always. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. I've thought it was like Wednesday, like 2 or 3 times today. My internal calendar, after working from home for like almost 2 weeks, fucked me up so bad. Calendar is so backwards. There's a kitty in the background. She's already tried to destroy the new chair. Are you not gonna come up and say hello because I called you out? She's a dingus. Anyway. I like that music. As y'all know, book club this month is Firestarter by Stephen King. If you didn't know, there's a banner right above me. So, where do we want to start with this book? Do y'all want a plot synopsis? Do y'all want positives, negatives, just general thoughts? What are we thinking for a starting point? Because I can go in several different orders. Because I really liked this book, personally. Also, can I just say, treat me like this is my college lit papers? Oof. I'm not sure that's a good thing. Oh, I can actually see that this time. There you go. Okay. I guess the first thing to note is, anyone who's ever read King before, y'all know he has a pretty distinctive style of writing. Which is super interesting. Because, like, there are not many authors I feel like you could read, and you could go, this is probably this guy, and I feel like he is arguably one of them. I've also read at least half a dozen of his books, probably more than that at this point. I have a small collection of King works in the other room. So, I've read Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, End of Watch, Firestarter, Dead Zone, The Shining, Doctor Sleep, Lisi's Story, Cujo, The Talisman. That's at least 10. I'm definitely missing some, but that's at least 10. And those are all ones that I own. Because people have figured out that they can gift me Stephen King books for my birthday. And they're right. They can do that, in fact. they can in fact do that. And it'd be a good gift. Eventually they're gonna have to start figuring out which ones I already have, though. His writing style also makes you read the pace he intends. No, I love that. Because, like, he is so... If y'all have not read his book on writing, which I also own, so that's 11, I really, really... If you have any, like, even just a hobbyist interest in writing, I really encourage you, go read his work on writing. It is quite literally called On Writing. The way that he talks about writing is so interesting. Because he kind of just goes, why not, a lot of the time, which is fascinating. A really good example is Pet Sematary. Obviously, the story for Pet Sematary is fictional because, duh. But the beginning of Pet Sematary is actually based off of an event that happened with his wife and daughter. The beginning of Pet Sematary, for those that don't know, they move into this house and their cat Church gets hit by a truck. That actually happened to King and his daughter. That, obviously, he was not Church, right? He did not do all of the things that Church does in that book. But, like, he actually came back to life, which is fascinating, right? And it's so interesting because he does it in Firestarter as well. Even if you know what's coming, he kind of just lets you sit there with it for a little bit, and you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is fascinating. Welcome in, Dawn. How are you this lovely Friday? We are talking about Firestarter because I'm a huge book nerd and Stephen King's my favorite author and I love him. So, like, there's several points in this book where you know shit's gonna go down, right? And he just lets you sit on that for, like, whole chapters. It's like, sir, I know you're fucking with me. Thank you. Blessed and never stressed. We love to see it. I am great. I would love for the rest of this congestion to leave me, but otherwise we are cruising. I have a new, much more comfortable chair, which we love. And we're talking about one of my favorite authors, which I also love, and was definitely just an excuse for me to read this book. This was a reread and points still surprise me, right? There's just points where, like... Alright, look. So one of my points with talking about this book is, especially if you've read a decent amount of King, the book does fall into a semi-predictable pattern. Not to say that that's bad. There's just a few points where if you've read a lot of King, you can, like, kinda sorta guess where it's going, right? So, like, a really good example, flip back to that menu so I'm not the whitest person on the planet. For those that did not read the book, the reason it's called Firestarter is it's this guy and his daughter on the run. The father is named Andy, and the child is named Charlie. Charlie has pyrokinesis, which means she can control and start fires. Making this Yu-Gi-Oh deck based off the... One of the monsters is called Libermancer Firestarter. That's sick. I love that. So Charlie, there's one point where her father jokingly calls her a Firestarter, hence the name of the book, obviously. So they are on the run from a sort of subset of the government called the Shop. And what happened is the Shop conducted an experiment some like 20 years prior or something. Not 20 years, but several years prior, with a substance called Lot 6. It's supposed to be a hallucinogenic that like triggers any sort of telekinetic abilities that humans have that is latent, right? So, what's cool about that, or what's the reason the plot exists, I guess, is Charlie's parents, Andy and Vicky, meet at this experiment. So ideally, there are 12 college kids, and 6 of them get shot with this drug, and the other 6 just get shot with like distilled water. But what you find out is they shot all 12 of them with it, with a huge variety of effects on them. So some poor kid like rips his own eyes out. Another girl dies a few days later from the drug. Both of her parents obviously survive. Her mom's got a little bit of telekinetic stuff, and her dad has this thing called the push. Basically what that means is he can kind of impress things onto other people. I think in the book they call it mental domination. So how that goes is he can say like, hey, put your hand down, and they will actually like do it out of compulsion. He talks about how different types of people are either harder or easier to do it to. So like people with a higher IQ are actually easier to push versus people with a lower IQ. And like older people and younger people are different, all that good stuff. I did not know that Libro was book in Spanish. I took French. That is very cool. That is very cool done. No, I love that a lot. I took French, so I did not immediately catch up on the Spanish there. But they get together, and I don't know if they just thought nothing would happen. I really have no idea. But they have Charlie, and Charlie has pyrokinesis, which is basically psychic fire, which if y'all don't think that's the coolest shit, you're wrong, because that's cool. However, it's also extremely dangerous. There are several times, there's points where Andy is talking about Charlie as an infant, and obviously she can't control anything at that point, where she starts crying, and something just lights on fire. Just fucking like the laundry basket on fire. They got to where they were keeping fire extinguishers in every room of the house when Charlie was an infant until she got old enough for them to start talking to her about what she had and that she needed to basically not do it. Tu parles français aussi? Un peu. Je suis... Oh, how do I wanna... J'adore français, mais, oh, why would you... Sir. J'adore français, mais, j'ai oublié beaucoup. That's the short version. I know a little bit, but I've forgotten a lot. Because I took it a lot in school, but I haven't been in school for like 3 or 4 years now or something. Anyway. So, Charlie and her father are on the run from these people that were related to this experiment because they found out that Charlie could do what she does, and they wanted her for like something national security, something. They wanted to run tests on a small child. Hello, baby. That's the box that my chair was in. We let her play in it a little bit earlier, but now it's got a bunch of shit in it. Hi, baby. Please behave. So there's all of these kind of sequences where Andy uses the push to try to get them to safety. There's one sequence where Charlie uses her ability to get money out of a phone machine, and then she accidentally sets a serviceman's shoes on fire because it always said that her gift or her curse or whatever you want to call it tends to go towards people she does not like, and she overhears him being like a royal asshole on the phone. So she kind of does this by accident. So the whole thing is that she's got this huge dangerous power, but she's afraid of it and like has very little control over it, to be honest. And it's getting stronger as she gets older. Hello, baby. Would you like to say hi to stream? There you go, Miss Kitty. We went all the way up to 5-6, not having a fellow... I know. It's so hard to keep French if you don't have someone around you that speaks it. Not because French is like necessarily harder than Spanish, but just because I feel like it's not something that comes up as often. So, hello, Mal. Feline detected, yes. So there's this whole chase sequence with the shop trying to get to them and them being like, LOL, no, fuck you, basically. They end up at Andy's grandfather's cabin in Vermont, and they're able to camp out there for a winter, but the shop already knows that they're there. And basically, the minute Andy tries to send letters out about their story, because the whole idea, hello baby, the whole idea is if they got national attention on the story, then the shop would be forced to back off, because then it wouldn't be a secret anymore. That's like the whole idea, right? So once you get past that, basically the shop is kind of sitting there and watching them and trying to figure out how to get them. They do succeed in getting them once they leave. They bring in this guy, John Rainbird, who, holy shit, I have a whole section of notes about that man. We'll get there. He and somebody he's worked with before basically shoot them with, like, drugs and bring them into the shop. So in the shop, which is actually in, like, eastern-ish Virginia, I think, they start running tests on Andy. Andy is kind of drugged and so, like, mentally broken. He actually can't use the push for a little bit, which is kind of wild. And Charlie just fucking refuses. She ends up getting worn down by her room tender, basically, who is, plot twist to her, not so much to us, also John Rainbird. So then she agrees to start doing tests if she gets stuff back, right? Is like, I will not light this fire unless you give me this. That kind of deal. Which does work for a little bit. And then kind of around the time she starts asking to see her dad, which is like something they do not want, right? Her dad starts kind of waking up. Trilingual, that's exciting. I am unfortunately monolingual, and would love to be bilingual, but that shit is hard if I have nowhere to use it, and I currently don't. So, there's a lot of cool languages out there. My, uncle and his family all speak Spanish, which is very cool, and a dash of Hebrew. Excuse me. But anyway, so this all happens, right? And then her dad starts getting like wise and kind of coming back to himself, if you will. He devises a plan to get them out. And the whole plan is that Charlie has been allowed to go ride this horse in a stable. That's like one of the things she's been granted for lighting fires. So they're supposed to meet in the stable, and he has pushed the captain of the whole shop into escorting them onto a plane that's supposed to take them away. John Rainbird, because he's a devious son of a bitch, figures it out. And it's wild, because I don't know, man, fuck this character. He's so cool, he's such a good character, but I hate him. He's an asshole. It's legit. You can always practice on Discord. True. I have to relearn a lot of something. Oh boy. I have like scraps of French in the back of my brain still, but it is scraps. Anyhow. So John actually gets to the stable before her dad does, and kind of corners Charlie. So then her dad comes in, of course, having no idea that, like, she would be in any sort of trouble. That goes poorly. Rainbird actually kind of falls out of a rafter and onto the ground. The horses are able to escape, but Charlie burns down the stable. Rainbird shoots her dad, and he dies. I honestly, we'll come back to that in a second. And she basically just takes the whole shop out. She says, fuck this, and her powers just rip everything to shreds. So then she escapes, obviously, because who the hell's gonna stop her after that? She's killed everyone who tried to stop her. And she ends up going back to this guy and his wife that helped them earlier in the book. Irv and Norma, I believe, is the wife's name. And they kind of take her in and nurse her back to health, thankfully. Because she's obviously, like, not well when she gets there. She's got an infected cut on her arm and her back. She's feverish, she's malnourished, she's exhausted. For context, Charlie starts this book at 7 years old and ends this book around 8 or 9. So when I say she's a child, I really, really mean that she's a child. She is baby, right? Yeah! So this is what actually made me want to read the book, Dawn. So as I said before, I'm a huge King fan. And I have a lot of his books that I'd like to read, but I totally missed the existence of this one, and then I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, this looks interesting, and then it was like based off of a Stephen King novel, and I was like, hold on. I was like, bet? So of course, I really want to watch the movie, but I really, really wanted to read the book first. I'm a big fan of, if you can read the book beforehand, it's usually worth it. But yeah, that's what made me want to read it. Fun. It is hilarious to me that the movie is just now coming out. The original Firestarter book came out in 1980. This is not a new book by any means. Like, this book is unironically decades old. And it's fascinating to me that we're just now getting a movie out of it, because it's really good. I have no idea if the movie's good. I haven't seen it, so I can't vouch for the film. But I really like the book, at least. Where am I going? Okay, so she gets back to Irv and Norma, who they met on the beginning chase sequence when they're trying to get away from the shot. And they kind of help her more or less get back on her feet. And then she goes looking for a national newspaper that is not tied to the government to tell her and her father's story, to kind of accomplish the goal of permanently putting their story out there and getting people to fuck off their backs, right? Because if she stays with Irv and Norma, she ends up putting them in danger. And she knows that. She's old enough to know that at this point. She also does kind of fall into the category of, because she's got, like, psychic powers, she's a little bit smarter than, like, a normal child, and she, like, knows a little bit more than a normal child would. Which, like, honestly works so well in the context of the story, and I'm gonna talk about Charlie specifically here in a minute. I have a lot to talk about. I am passionate about books TM in general, Don. That's why the theme of the stream is what it is. That's why there's books. That's just me. I like games, but reading was arguably my first love before video games happened. They made a Firestarter movie or TV series in 2002? Interesting. That does kind of make more sense since this book is from the 80s. Fascinating. I did not know that. There's been a lot of media made from stuff King has written, and it's all different levels of good or bad. Hello, kitty. Can I help you? A manga monarch. Manga is very cool. I have the first 6 books of Soul Eater somewhere in the house. I've got a little manga. I run into the same issue with manga as I do with comic books that I was telling you the other night of, I love them, but I go through them so fucking fast that it's hard. It's hard to justify buying all of them and trying to store all of them. Like, for what it's worth, I read this in 3 days. It probably would have been less, except for I was, like, working and stuff. Where were comic books for me? Yeah. No, I love all that kind of stuff. I just have to be careful about what I accumulate, because if not, I will just accumulate everything, and then we'll have no room for other stuff. Even 300-page graphic novel. See, that I have a similar problem, Aya. Like, even bigger graphic novels just, like, don't take that long. I will sit and linger on the art, because I love the art. But, like, actually reading them does not take very long. It's super quick. For you to retain it all is quite a feat. Thank you. That's part of the reason I've been waiting until the week of to read. Because I know I can get through it relatively quickly, and then it's fresh in my brain. So I finished this yesterday, and I wrote my little notes document during some downtime at work today. So, just to finish off my super quick synopsis, I am nutshelling so much, by the way, so if you want to look up an actual plot synopsis, please do, because I'm skipping over a lot. But basically, she leaves Irv and Norma's house and hitchhikes her way up to the Rolling Stones magazine, and the book ends with her asking to meet with one of their writers so that she can tell them her story. Which, like, I don't know. I love that as an ending, personally. Alright, let me adjust some stuff over here real quick. I need to make that a little bit smaller so it's not quite so bright. Cool, love that for me. So, it'd be a stand-in for Fahrenheit 451. I still need to read that. That's on my to-read list. Cause somehow I got away with not reading it in school. So, but I really like, if y'all want, like, dystopian shit, go read, 1984 by Orwell. That book will fuck you up. It's so good, but that book will fuck you up. You're gonna love it. I'm excited. I need to get my hands on a copy. Speaking of, oh, I can't believe Leaf isn't here. He's gonna fucking die. Next book club is August 26th, and we're gonna be reading The Poppy War. Mostly because I think Thomas will die if I don't read that soon. Because he's been trying to get me to read that for like a year. So we're going to be reading that next month and talking about that. And if Leaf is up for it, I might have him hop into Discord with me and we can talk about it on stream. Like he did a little bit last month. So, now that we have covered that, I kind of already started it on my, like, quote-unquote criticism, so I guess we'll start there. Brave New World. I've heard of that one. I don't know as much about it as I do about Fahrenheit 451, though. Somehow that one has escaped my radar a little more thoroughly. So, it's worth mentioning, if y'all haven't read the book and would like to, Firestarter does have some dated language in it. Just because it released in 1980 for the most part. King also has a few moments with characters where, not in this book specifically necessarily, but in general. No, what did I just click on? Stop, go back. Oh my god, no. No. Thank you. King has this whole thing where he, and he talks about this on writing, which is why I know this. He talks about writing characters as they are, as opposed to making them more palatable for someone. So there are moments in several of his books where his characters will use not the most kosher language, like language that I personally am not, like, the most comfortable repeating. But it's one of those things of, like, you could put it on him for putting it in there, and I think that's totally fine if that's something that bothers you and you, like, can't read it because of that. For me, it is very much a thing of, like, that is the character. So there is a little bit of dated language in this book. It's really not a lot. It's, like, I think maybe one or two spots where it's just language that we traditionally don't use anymore. Because, again, this book is from the 80s. So, that's arguably a criticism if that is something that's going to make you uncomfortable. It's something that I already knew because I've looked into why he writes the way that he does, and I've read a good amount of his work. But it's just worth mentioning for those who maybe aren't as familiar, or maybe that language is a bit more triggering than it is for me. So, Another thing that I kind of feel, but I'm still a little... We do kind of almost lean into the trope of like, oh, this woman has a lot of powers and she's really emotional and like can't control them. It's something I've talked about a little bit, not on stream, I don't think, but with some superhero plot lines and stuff. It's something that comes up pretty often, right? You have this lady, she has unfathomable power, but because she is a woman, she is emotional and she can't really handle it. There are characters that do this really, really well, and there are characters that do this really poorly because some people are unfortunately sexist and stupid. I don't think that's what's happening here. The interesting thing that I think kind of deviates Charlie from this category is that Charlie, first of all, is a literal child, right? I think that changes the dynamic a lot by itself. It's just the fact that she's a literal fucking child. Excuse me. The other thing with that is they don't paint it as like she cannot the ability she has is not so much painted as like she cannot control it. It is much more painted as it is difficult and at times borderline impossible to control. Which I think is an important distinction between like, oh, she has this power and just can't handle it versus like probably a grown adult would struggle to handle this. There's an excellently written sequence where the first time they are at Irv and Norma's house, when they are on the run from the shop, where she can sense that the shop is on the way to come get them as they plan to kill her father and take her. And Andy kind of has this moment of like, you can do this if you want. And she doesn't want to. Like, let's be really clear, Charlie is scared of her powers. Charlie is extremely scared of her powers. She does not want to use them. She does not want to hurt anyone. But she is kind of driven to use them in these states of emergencies in the early parts of the book. So, like, she uses them to empty the payphones because they need money to get away from the shop. She ends up using it at Irv and Norma's house because they need to get away. So, she goes outside, and they really try to warn these guys. They really try to warn these guys that this is a bad fucking idea. And they don't listen because they don't really understand what they're up against at this point in the book. She lights people's hair on fire. She lights a guy's face on fire. She basically burns that guy to a crisp. She explodes the engine in each and every one of their cars. And there's one point where she does kind of lose control of it towards the end, and she starts burning up a couple of the farm chickens. And Andy has to basically slap her across the face to, like, bring her back to herself. Because the whole thing is Andy's powers hurt him, right? If he overuses the push, he gets a headache. It's not a great time for him. Charlie's powers always want to be let out. They don't give her a headache. They feel almost good to use. And it almost feels like another entity inside of her at times because it wants to get out and cause destruction. So, especially in these early parts of the books where she is really afraid of her powers, it is extremely difficult for her to maintain control. Especially because she's kind of been taught to not use them, both for her safety and the safety of those around her. So, like, that's a fucking insane sequence, and I wish I could convey to y'all how cool that sequence is. It's nuts. But she has this moment after that happens where she is understandably extremely upset. And she goes, I'm never gonna make fires again. And for context, that happens about this far through the book. Well, hold on. If I can find it real quick. Yeah. That happens about this early in the book. So you know we're not done with her making fire. At all. You expect children to be emotional, especially in a survival situation. It's gonna stress the kid out a lot. Yeah, exactly, Aya. It's like, it would be... Like, you cannot expect a kid to have total control over something the whole time anyway, because they're a child. And then on top of that, being in a life or death situation, potentially. Like, I'm almost 25, and that sounds extremely stressful. I can't imagine being 7. So, like, let me see if I can find this passage for you. So they try to warn them. They really, really try to warn them. And it does not matter. So, Charlie turned towards them. As she did so, half a dozen other men, John Mayo and Ray Knowles among them, broke for the porch's back steps with their guns drawn. Charlie's eyes widened a little, and Andy felt something hot pass by him in a warm puff of air. The 3 men at the front end of the porch got halfway towards them when their hair caught on fire. A gun boomed, deafeningly loud, and a splinter of wood perhaps 8 inches long jumped from one of the porch's supporting posts. Norma Manders screamed and Andy flinched, but Charlie seemed not to notice. Her face was dreamy and thoughtful. A small Mona Lisa smile touched the corners of her mouth. She's enjoying this, Andy thought, with something like horror. Is that why she's so afraid of it? Because she likes it? So then Charlie turns back towards a man named Al Steinowitz. Again. They're trying to take care of her. I'm skipping ahead, I'm sorry. Someone grabs her dad, which, like, that's a good fucking idea. So then, another gun goes off, and Irv gets shot, like, in the shoulder, or not in the shoulder, in, like, the elbow or the arm. So, of course, Norma's freaking out, understandably. And then, Charlie was looking down at Al Steinowitz, and suddenly the cold, confident look was gone from Al's face, and he was in terror. His yellow complexion grew positively cheesy. I love that line. It's so good. No, don't, he said in almost a conversational tone of voice. Don't. It was impossible to tell where the flames began. Suddenly, his pants and his sports coat were blazing. His hair was a burning bush. He backed up, screaming, bounced his arms off the side of his car, and half turned to Norval Bates, his arms stretched out. Andy felt that soft rush of heat again, a displacement of the air, as if a hot slug had thrown at rocket speed had just passed his nose. Al Steinowitz's face caught on fire. For a moment, he was all there, screaming silently under a transparent call of flame, and then his features were blending, merging, running like a tallow. Norval shrank away from him. Al Steinowitz was a flaming scarecrow. He staggered blindly down the driveway, waving his arms, and then collapsed face first down beside the third car. He didn't look like a man at all. He looked like a burning bundle of rags. And that's not even the biggest display of Charlie's powers in the entire book. She does so much more. It's insane. Like, even her dad has this moment of, get out quickly, she's never done anything like this before, and I don't know if she can stop. That is an appropriate emote to react. Yeah, that's an appropriate reaction. Let's see. She then, in the same sequence of events, let's see, blows up the cars from the by heating up the gas in the engine and just fucking lights them up. The whole sequence is so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's kind of fucked up, but it's great. There's one point where I'm trying to make sure I've covered the whole scene. There's one point Andy does slap her to try to get her to stop because he doesn't know what else to do. And there's a very brief moment where you unironically think that she's gonna light this man on fire. And she, of course, is very upset about that the minute she comes back to herself. But, like, that's the sequence that makes her say, I'm never lighting another fire again. And, like, honestly, fair. Like, I don't blame her for not wanting to do that again. But you know, as a reader, that it's way too early in the book for her to not do that again, right? Like, there's no way. That doesn't make sense for the plot. So it's very much a thing of, like, there are some familiar patterns here, and she does kind of dance on that trope of woman is emotional and has a lot of power. But it's such a different dynamic when it's a child, and it's about controlling the power in general, and it's not just about the fact that she's upset. Like, of course she's upset. She's 7. She got pulled out of school because bad men are after her and her dad. She's in the 2nd grade. I can't even imagine. That's no. So it's a lot, man. And like a note that I made here. There's no mistake to be made here. The story is tragic. Like, Charlie has powers she never asked for and that her parents never meant to get or to pass on to her. Instead of getting help, her mother is killed and she and her father are chased across the Northeast until they're shot with drugs and incapacitated. She makes friends with an orderly who betrays her and wants to kill her. John Rainbird, I'm gonna have to talk about this man here soon. He is so fucked up. If Charlie hadn't met Irvin Norma, I really don't know what she would have done after the shop. Because I just can't imagine. I really can't. And then her determination to do something even after losing her father and really everyone. I don't know. I like that a lot. I like her a lot. Just in general. How do I want to pick through this? I don't think having a woman being emotional instantly makes a character portrayal bad either. It's really bad when that is the person's whole character, or is the sole motivation for things happen. Yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at, Swift. It's not necessarily terrible to have an emotional character and for that emotional character to be female, but for that to justify everything that she does, and for that to be effectively her whole character is, like, really kind of gross. Like, I'm totally fine with having an emotional villainess in a story, or even an emotional protagonist in a story. I just want their characters to have substance. So, which Charlie does. Very much so. So that's not an issue, really. This music is a vibe. I fuck with it. Also, hello, Swift. How are you? That's another thing that I'll give King in general, both in this book and in most of the stuff I've read of his. The characters pretty much all feel like people. There's 1 or 2 characters in this book that we don't really get a lot of screen time with, so they're a little bit more two-dimensional. But, like, nobody feels like a cardboard cutout, right? Like, there's one guy that you see for 5 seconds at a front desk, and obviously that doesn't, like, mean much to anybody. But any character that talks for more than, like, 2 seconds feels like a full-fledged character to some degree. Like, of course, we know more about Charlie than we do about, say, Wayneless, who is one of the scientists who was working with Lot 6 at the beginning of the book. Like, of course we know more about Charlie, because she's the protagonist. But Wayneless still has goals and a personality that is different from the other characters around him and all of that stuff. So, I'm such a big fan of good, cohesive character development that it's part of the reason I like King so much. Is just he doesn't skip on making his people. They feel usually shitty people but still fleshed out, also not wrong. I will say something in this book. Most of the characters are not shitty people. Like, obviously, I am anti the shop and what they were doing in general, and a lot of the shop people are garbage. But Captain Hollister, or Cap in the book, while I don't obviously want him to succeed because he's part of the group that was pursuing Andy and Charlie and etc., it's pretty clear that he's not, like, necessarily a terrible person. He's just very much on the wrong side and, like, has belief systems that have, like, led him there. He's a pretty, like, tenacious, like, springy dude until, Andy pushes him at one point later in the book. And you almost feel bad for him a few times because he just ends up in situations that just kind of suck. But that's cool, right? Because, like, he could be considered one of the main antagonists. And you could just leave him at that. You could have absolutely just left him to be an antagonist, but instead you made him a character and a person. And I just think that's cool. Like, I think that's way more fun. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Alright, speaking of characters. Oh, just a couple of small bullet points before we move into the 2 or 3 big character things that I kind of wanted to get into. King has a really nice way of moving from the present into backstory and vice versa. There are several moments where, like, Andy has a really big headache or he's kind of drifting off to sleep, so the whole idea is that he, thinks of all of these things when he's in this kind of, like, half asleep or potentially addled state of mind, which is cool because it lets you keep up with the pacing of the story while also giving you backstory that you need to understand things moving forward. So, like, that's what happens when you find out about how he got his abilities, is he pushes too hard, gets this massive headache, really kind of just passes out. And that's kind of the stuff that's running through his mind, is his mind is fighting and struggling to be conscious again. Which, like, it's just really cool. I like that way of doing stuff because it lets you move through the story consistently while also giving you context. There's no, like, huge exposition dump. There's not just, like, a lore dump in the middle of a page, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of figure stuff out as you move along, which I think is excellent. And then the other thing is that there are several perspective changes. This book is written in third person, so you know stuff before the main character does, and, like, all this kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff is cool. It can be difficult to do correctly, though. Sometimes timing the perspective changes is difficult to do. Finding the breaks in the story and then knowing when to move on is also just generally, like, not the easiest thing. He does it really well, though. Like, every time we switched perspectives, it was not very confusing. Sometimes he would just do it at the beginning of a chapter and make it super easy. Sometimes he'd have a break and then do it there. But, like, there was never just, like, a super random switch, which I think is really helpful for just, like, keeping up. I think he described it as being haunted by voices of the past a couple of times. I would say particularly in the case of Andy McGee in this book, that's extremely accurate. Because, like, one of the moments we relive is he gets these hunches. It's another kind of one of his, like, abilities, but he doesn't really control it. He's working at his job, and he just gets the feeling that something's wrong. So he leaves, and he goes home, and he finds his wife dead. And his daughter has been kidnapped by the shop, basically. So there's a whole sequence where he, like, goes, and he gets her back from the shop, and, like, that's a great sequence. But the point that I'm making here is that, like, we don't experience any of that in the present. That's all stuff we get from the past. But it's stuff that we need to know moving forward. So we get all this context of, like, what happened to Charlie's mom. Like, what happened when the shop had a hold of Charlie really briefly. Like, how did she get out of that? It answers questions for you while also just telling you another part of the story, which I think is great. So, let's see here. I'm gonna take a drink. I'm gonna stop talking for 2 seconds. Whew. Why does my phone always blow up when I'm live, yo? Why is this like this? I hate this. Like, I love people and I'm glad they want to talk to me, but damn. They always be doing it when I'm live. I'm just making sure there's nothing important. Okay, we're good. Okay, so I think the next character that we kind of have to dig into is John Rainbird. So John Rainbird is a Native American man who is quite large, and is a Vietnam War vet who has lost one eye and has pretty significant scarring over one side of his face. That's arguably the least disturbing thing about this man. He is very quiet when he moves. He is extremely smart. He knows more than he's supposed to pretty much at any given moment in time. He's fucking weird. He's cool, but he's weird. Like, he's cool as a character. He's a horrible person. One of the things that fascinates him is death. So whenever he does these kind of jobs where he ends up killing someone, he always makes sure to look into their eyes to try and see what they're seeing as the lights go out. It's a really dark sentence, right? He says it really casually, man. He says it so casually. Phone died, but I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, no worries, man. Welcome back. You came into us going over John Rainbird, who is an extremely fucked up character, but is extremely interesting. So, like, the long and short of it is he's done a lot of jobs for the shop over time, and that's kind of how he knows about Charlie. And he decides that someone with that much power is probably really interesting and wants to, like I said, because he has this fascination with seeing people's eyes go out as they die, he wants to see hers because she has all this power, because she's such a special child. So he agrees to help bring her and her dad in on the condition that he be stationed as her orderly. She does not know who he is. He gets her to trust him, and then when they can get no further with the tests, he basically gets to have her and plans on killing her. And, like, it's... oh my god. I can't even tell y'all how much that nutshells it. It's so screwed up. There are a few times where people underestimate John, and it absolutely bites them in the ass. Like, the whole reason that he's able to get that deal to get to Charlie is because he waits until the exact right moment to reveal that he knows anything, and basically forces Captain Hollister, or Cap, into agreeing because he doesn't really have another choice. Which is just fascinating. So then he also does this thing where, in his own really demented way, I think he actually does care about Charlie. Like, her victories are kind of his victories in a way. Like, he's the one who encourages her to do the tests, which is obviously manipulation, but he's the one who says, don't do the tests without getting anything back for it, which empowers her, because he doesn't give... Truly, one of the things he straight up says is that he does not give a damn about the shop. He just cares about this dance that he and Charlie are in. But Charlie doesn't even know that she's in a dance. As far as she's concerned, he is just a very nice orderly who comes in and talks to her and has become her friend. Which is so many levels of fucked up, dude. His character is so messed up. He's so well written, though, but he's so fucked up. When Andy is doing his escape plan, he actually plans to have Rainbird sent away. But Rainbird figures out what's going on and cancels that flight so that he can be in town to try to confront Charlie. He's way too smart for anyone's good. It benefits no one. It's extremely distressing. It's very cool, though. But there are several times where he kind of says that he loves Charlie, and, like, that's kind of one of the things he says as he dies. When she lights that stable up, he goes down with it. And one of the last things he says is that he loves her. And I think in his own fucked up way, he probably does. I just also think that he needs to not be allowed near children. Ever. He's a terrifying man. He is playing 4D chess, and it's fucking terrifying, Aya. This man is so scary. I am so glad that he does not exist in real life. That would be the scariest shit. Oh my god. No. He's so scary, dude. He's so interesting, though, truly. Like, that's one of the things I like about the third-person omniscient perspective that King does when he writes, is a lot of times you get to get in the head of all these, like, villains or antagonists. It's like, you spend some time with John Rainbird, you spend some time with Cap, you spend some time with one of the scientists, Hochstetter. That's his name. Which is just really neat. And, like, to put it to you this way, y'all. Sometimes King does this thing, and like I don't know that this is just a general thing. I'm referring specifically to like some of the ways he does things, like in the Dark Half. The way that this character is built up, he's almost mythologically good at what he does, to the point where like I was kind of expecting him to somehow survive the stable fire, because he's survived everything else so far. And he's seen through a lot of shit that he shouldn't have. So, like, why would he not survive one more thing? Like, the stable scene happened. I kind of had this moment of, like, is he actually dead? And, like, throughout the end of the book, I was really waiting for him to make a reappearance. I really thought it was gonna happen. Obviously, like, there was always the chance that it wouldn't. But, like, if anyone could have survived that fire, it's him. Just part of it. He's so scary. King has some characters that are people and some characters that are characters. That's not a bad way to put it. Rainbird definitely teeters on that line between like being a person and being like a character. Cause like he's just fucking unearthly smart. And I think that's part of the reason people underestimate him, is he knows to not let on about that until it's the right time. Because he's smart enough. Which is just, again, I'm so glad he does not exist in real life. That would be so worrying. But, like, part of what's interesting about that is we get such a good look at Charlie through him. And Charlie, like, becomes so impressive through his eyes. Because, like, as he's working as her orderly, of course, she, like, doesn't really want to talk to him. He's an employee of the shop. And it's fascinating because, like, he kind of compares getting her to open up to him and, like, befriending her to safe cracking. It's like, there are no impossible cracks, but some of them are really difficult. And if you push it too hard, you can kill the money inside or destroy the contents. And then you won't have what you wanted. So that's what I mean when I say there's a dance that they're locked in, is like, even though Charlie isn't like the most aware of it, there's this whole thing where he's trying to like befriend her and get her to open up and like crack the safe. And slowly it happens because she's fucking 8 years old at this point in the book. So yeah, obviously because she's a child, of course that doesn't go in her favor. Duh. There's just, he is so like fascinated by her and almost like really proud of her for the fact that she holds out as long as she does. And it makes his ability to befriend her like that much more meaningful for him. And it's part of the reason why I say, to a point, I do believe him when he says he loves Charlie. I just don't think it's a, like, healthy kind of love. Like, it's obviously not a healthy relationship if he basically wants to, like, befriend her and then kill her. Duh. But I think he's being serious when he says he really admires her. I think he's being really serious when he's like, this kid is so much smarter than any of you are giving her credit for, and y'all will pay for it, and I will not. Like, John Rainbird is hands down one of the smartest people in the whole book. It sort of mimics the way they set up old mythical heroes, especially in Arthurian myth. I'm not particularly familiar with Arthurian myth specifically, besides like the big stuff, but in general, yes. John Rainbird is teetering dangerously close to a myth with the way that he is as a character. That's kind of what Swift was saying too, with some characters are people and some characters are characters. Like, John Rainbird is certainly a person, but he's a person if, like if a person was a pipe cleaner, you kind of twist it around a little bit, so it's not quite what you would imagine. Which I think is fascinating. He's a terrifying character, though. Like, his whole thing, where he's disguised as an orderly, he has everyone treat him as if he is an orderly, even if Charlie's not around, because he knows that rumors can spread and he doesn't want anything to get back to her. Who thinks of that when it comes to an 8-year-old? John fucking Rainbird, that's who. like, he's extremely smart, and he's extremely good at what he does, and that's why he's so scary as a villain. Because you, in a weird way, you don't want Hochstetter or Cap or really anyone near her because they want to use her. And John does kind of help her gain some control of the situation and put some space between them, but then that also positions him closer, which you also don't want. And she does not know that he is a traitor, basically, until her dad uses Cap to sneak a note to her and tells her. And it's... oof. She has a really hard time with that because, like, this guy has become her only friend. This guy has become borderline her father in a world where she can't get to her actual father. But then to find out that this man has lied, to find out that this man has manipulated her, it just breaks her teeny tiny heart, and I feel so bad for her. But, like, I just really, really, really like Charlie in general. She's a child, you know, she's very young. She's extremely intelligent, and I think it makes seeing the world from her perspective very interesting. There's little bits of her that feel kind of like her dad. Like, her dad is kind of more realistic, borderline pessimistic in some cases. And you can feel that in her a little bit because she's around that. But she wants so badly for things to work out. She's so tired of running. She's so tired of hiding. Like, she doesn't want to do this. She's a child. Like, she needs to be in elementary school. So, like, I mean, you can hardly blame her. And she's grappling with this power that she has that she really does not want. There's this whole sequence where you find out that at one point she hurt her mother by accident with these powers. And, like, I can only imagine the trauma that would come from that sort of thing. Like, that would be insane. Like, you end up so sympathetic for this little girl. But at the same time, she has so much strength in her tiny little body. I love it. I love it. I love her so much. She's such a good character. And if I watch this movie and they butcher Charlie McGee, I will be so angry. Because she's such a good, strong protagonist. She's stronger than her dad. Not just physically, but, like, really mentally. Like, she holds on way longer than you would ever expect a child to want to or to be able to. And I love that for her, right? Like, that's so cool. There's some sections, too, where you start to see her light fires again, like I said, with the testing. She starts to become less afraid of the power, and that's a really fascinating shift. She doesn't like using it per se, because she still doesn't enjoy hurting people. Like, she's a child, she doesn't want to hurt other people. But she kind of has this perspective to where she kind of starts with, oh, I'll never light fires again, to where, like, oh, I'll light them for this test, and then it's kind of like, oh shit, this feels too good. I don't like that this feels good. This is getting bad. And then she kind of gets to this point where she doesn't like killing people, but she becomes willing to kill these particular people because they've ruined her fucking life and they are in her way of whatever could be left of it. So in that way, she almost becomes more like her father. Like, she kind of goes from this thing of like, oh, I'll never light fires again, I don't want to hurt anybody, I'm not going to do it, to doing, at least in her mind, what she believes is necessary. And honestly, for most of the book, there's a really good case for her being right. Like, she ends up lighting some fires for the shop, kind of out of survival. Like, she thinks that she'll be able to see her dad if she completes some of the tests. She ends up burning down the shop to leave, because how the hell else was she gonna get out? She was in the stable, there were people surrounding the stable, Rainbird was right there and wanted to kill her. Like, truly basically said, is like, you're gonna come up into these rafters, and we're gonna talk, and then I'm gonna end it. And she almost goes with him. She really, really almost goes with him. It's the one part of the book where you kind of see her really waver. Because she wants to trust John, she wants to like John, but she knows that he is dangerous and she knows that he is bad. But she also knows that she is tired. The shop very much did a self-fulfilling prophecy when it came to her being dangerous. Because what they did is they took a little girl who was scared of her powers and they let her practice them. So she was no longer as afraid. Which, like, in theory is great. But how great is that when you're the people that she wants to use it on more than anything because she hates you? Because she's a child. Because you took away her childhood. I just can't imagine who thought that was a good fucking idea. But like, that's part of the thing, that's part of Rainbird's thing, funnily enough, is like, y'all keep underestimating her. Y'all keep thinking that she's not gonna do this stuff because she's a child. Y'all better watch yourselves, because she knows a lot more than y'all think, and she will do a lot more than y'all think if it comes down to it. And I hate to say it, but he ends up being 100% right on both of those fronts. Like, I don't know, she's such a good character. There is one point where her father is dying. So basically what happens is they're in the stable. He gets shot kind of in the side of the neck by Rainbird, but even right before then he pushed too hard and damaged his brain. He had a stroke. So the whole left side of his face is not working, his left leg will not hold him, so he's on the ground anyway, and then he gets shot by Rainbird basically in the neck. So as he's kind of dying, he's like, you have to get out of here, burn it all to the ground if you have to. And she does not want to leave him because that's her father. Of course not, right? And then he kind of has the thing of like, I forget the exact line. Let me see if I can find it really quick. That's not far enough. So he is dying, and he's trying to get his final words out to her, right? So they're going to want to kill you now, you understand? No more games. Gloves off. He pronounced it gloves from the corner of his cruelly twisted mouth. Don't let them, Charlie, and don't let them cover it up. Don't let them say just a fire. And he kind of has this moment where he kind of has to, like, collect himself. He's like, you know, he says, you have to get away if you can, Charlie. She wiped the blood away from with the hem of her jumper. From behind, the fire baked into her. Get away if you can. If you have to kill the ones in your way, Charlie, do it. It's a war. Make them know they've been in a war. You have to get away if you can, Charlie. Do it for me. Do you understand? And there's a few more lines, but his last words is basically him telling her that he loves her. And it's a heartbreaking sequence. Because I really was honestly kind of shocked he didn't make it, like I said before. So she kind of adopts that mindset for at least a few chapters of like, okay, y'all want a war? You fucking got one, and you cannot handle it. And that's exactly what happens. They cannot handle her. Absolutely not. There's this whole implication where after she's done just destroying the entire shop, with the way that she kind of gets her power back under control, and she pushes it towards water, and it kind of helps her disperse it. So she pushes it towards the duck pond and burns up almost the whole duck pond, getting her power back under control. And she even says the power is just kind of dwelling under the surface, much closer to the surface than she is comfortable with. And she can tell that it's not done growing, because she's still a little kid. If she can do all of this at 8, 9, imagine what she can do at 12, 15, 21. Imagine what she can do when she gets older. If that power gets bigger, it's like, whether or not she retains control over it, that's fucking insane, right? And she's very cool, but also, holy shit, terrifying child. But like, she's so pure-hearted. Like, throughout her being captured, she just wants her dad, man. It breaks my fucking heart, because she just wants her dad. It's... oof. I had another thing that I was gonna say about Charlie, and I forget what it was now. Did I not write it down? Damn it. I don't think I did. Hopefully that's not important. Let's see. I had another thing I was gonna say about Charlie. I really don't remember. And I hate that. I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to it. I don't know. Charlie's just a character that I think you could probably break down all day long. Because her parents absolutely give her a complex about her abilities as a child because they don't particularly want her to use them. So then she goes through this whole sequence of like, okay, but sometimes I need to use them. And then she doesn't have the control, and then she starts to get control, but then she starts to realize how much power she really has and how hard it is to rein it in once it's out. It really is almost described as like a separate entity in her sometimes. Like she mentally like screams at it to back off and has to like kind of wrangle it in. And I have to imagine that would be really scary for a little girl, right? Like, there are so many reasons to be sympathetic to this child, and that really is just one of them. Not to mention she loses both of her parents via this endeavor. She loses John. She never really had John, but like she thought she did. So that she has to mourn this person that she never really truly knew. And then even when she gets to Irvin Norma's at the end, she can't stay there because people will find out that she's there and then the shop will come for her. So, I don't know what it would be, but I would love to see a sequel to Firestarter to see what happens to her. Like, does she get to live to adulthood? What happens after her story goes out on the Rolling Stones? Does anything happen? Is she able to, like, live her life not being chased by the shop, or is she kept in a psychiatric facility? Like, what's going on with that? I don't know. It's very much a story where I love the way it ended. I love where it ended. I think it was a great spot. I would be so curious to see what happens after, despite the fact that it would ruin the great ending. It's a dichotomy of things. So, I don't know. To talk about her dad for a little bit, actually, sort of related. There's a few moments where I really, really like her dad, and there's a few moments where I almost don't, which is very interesting. I think Andy has really just a really solid case of just being extremely human. Like, obviously he doesn't enjoy being on the run. That's exhausting. He doesn't know what he's gonna do. So when they finally are captured and they start drugging him, he kind of almost gives up for a little bit. Like, he just kind of lets himself be drugged and just kind of, pieces out mentally. And, like, you want to hate him for kind of giving up on Charlie for a little bit, but first of all, he comes back around. But, like, second of all, there's just only so much you can handle as a person, and I think that's kind of where Andy goes, is, like, there was too much. He couldn't handle anymore. I still think that was stupid of him. But, like, at the same time, I can't say that I would have done any differently. I mean, how would you know, right? You have no idea, because why on earth would you be in that scenario? That's not how that works. Yeah, that's basically it, Aya. It's like, it is a bad decision, but it's a sympathetic decision, especially because he realizes it's a bad decision, and then goes out of his way to go after Charlie again to try to help her. So he pushes his doctor, who's been doing the tests on him, and it causes what is called an echo into a ricochet. Basically, if you push someone and it, because it's a psychic thing, if it connects to the correct thing in the human brain, because of how delicate the mind is, it can cause what's called an echo, where it kind of just fucks with your brain, where like things just aren't firing quite right, and then that can turn into a ricochet, and it can actually potentially kill someone. And it does kill this doctor. The echo turns into a ricochet, and he ends up killing himself by putting his hand into the garbage disposal. Which, like, holy fucking shit. You want to talk about that? Oh my god. That is such a brutal way to go out. Oh my god. Wild. Absolutely wild. But that's a danger that he runs because he's trying to get to Charlie. He's trying to get to Charlie. He's trying to get to Charlie. And he starts another echo in Captain Hollister. And you don't see that one quite come to fruition. You don't see it turn into a ricochet. I believe he dies in the stable fire. But you kind of, you get some flashes into their minds and just kind of watch them deteriorate, and it's fascinating. There have apparently been instances before they were on the run where Andy was kind of able to break the connection and undo the echo, and people ended up being fine. But these were not people he could like consistently interact with, right? Like he was trying to escape. A little different scenario. It did indeed go from 0 to 100 very quickly. You kind of knew it was coming, because so here's the whole sequence, right? Is his brain connected this memory from when he was quite young, when he would occasionally dress in women's clothing. It's something he was very ashamed of, and I assume probably had kind of buried the memory, but like the echo kind of brings it back up. And for some reason that gets tied to the garbage disposal in his mind. So there's one point where you actually get taken through a sequence of him like putting on his wife's undergarments and kind of going around the house, and is in the kitchen and looks down the garbage disposal and comes back to himself and goes and changes and is kind of okay for a little bit. But then you find out that he is dead, and he was found again in his wife's undergarments with his hand clean to the elbow in the garbage disposal in the kitchen sink. Who fucking boy. It is a wild sequence. And it's interesting because since you don't see it happen, like we as readers don't see it happen, we actually hear about it secondhand. That both like means that you don't sit on it as long, but also gives your imagination something to latch onto so profoundly. It's so interesting. Because like we didn't go through that sequence, but you bet my brain went there, even though we didn't actually see it happen. So what happens with Cap is he gets this weird association with golf and snakes, and specifically this time his brother got bitten by a snake. So like every time he drives past a golf field, it kind of like focuses out. He gets pushed into taking a note to Charlie, and at one point he asks about playing a round of golf with her dad. And like that's kind of weird. And then he mentions like watch out for snakes, and of course she's like, what in the actual fuck are you talking about? Because of course there's no snakes in the shop. It's a very regulated government building. Why would we be talking about snakes? Because he was pushed by her dad. He is a character that like Cap specifically, while I don't necessarily sympathize with in a conventional sense, like I don't think he was necessarily a great person, I do feel a little bit bad about the way stuff went for him, because I feel like in a lot of ways he was, like, him chasing after the McGees was not personal the way it was for some of the other people. It was much more just a job that he was trying to do. And like, again, I'm not saying that was a good thing or that makes him a good person, because that's not the case. But it's not like John Rainbird, right, who is just like inside and out all kinds of fucking whack. It's not like that at all. Cap is very much a person who is not necessarily a good person, but who I don't necessarily think is outright evil. I think the organization he works for is pretty evil. But I don't know that he necessarily is, like, the devil himself. You know what I mean? So, he's interesting. And I think the book is very much better for having him in it. So, let's see. What else did I want to get into? I don't know. Oh, one thing I'll give her to add. There is very much one point where he gets really realistic about things that could happen to her. Applause, thank you. Where he's kind of like I love my daughter and I never want anything to happen to her, but like she is abnormal. Like the chances of Charlie living a normal life are like not super high. Like particularly if their solution to get out of stuff is to tell the national news about them. Like the chances of her living a normal life are just extremely low. He's like, he has kind of this moment where he's like, I don't want her to be in the shop, of course. But like, there's very much a chance that she'll end up in some kind of watched place somewhere. But hopefully it's for her benefit and not for like the benefit of national security or political gain. Because he has this moment of like, what if they do get away from the shop and then she gets nabbed by some foreign power? Like, what if somebody in Europe or Asia just fucking up and scoops her up and leaves? And it's an interesting moment of clarity where he kind of says like, my kid is not normal. Like, I think what he actually says is Charlie is kind of a freak. And like, you hate that wording, but it's kind of like, no, it's him trying to be real with himself about it. Of like, yeah, of course she's not normal. She never has been. And like, much as me personally and her dad would love for her to have like gone to school and been a normal kid, like, the chances of that happening were just basically none because she just is who she is. One of the big things with her is her like coming to kind of accept that like none of this is her fault, right? Like, sure, she sets the fires and like that's to some degree her responsibility, but like it's not her fault the shop is after her. It's not her fault she has these powers in the first place, and it's certainly not her fault that she like can't control them. She's a child. So it's like, you know, he does have this sequence where he kind of acknowledges that she's a freak, not to her face. But he kind of does it in this pragmatic way of like, I'm trying to figure out a way for my daughter to be safe in a world that she is not built for. And I have to imagine that that would be like soul crushing as a parent, right? Like, I'm not trying to draw any like real life parallels to that necessarily. But like, I just can't imagine like looking at my future kid and just realizing that like they are not built for the world or the world is not built for them, either one. And having to figure out a way for them to exist in this world where they don't fit in a conventional way. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of set right around the beginning of the Cold War. So that foreign power concern that Andy has is very real. Of like, sure, in theory, nothing would happen. But like, even if you could get the shop to back off, who's to say somebody, like Russia, if we're talking about the Cold War, like swooped in and grabbed Charlie and like used her to end the Cold War and like laid destruction to the United States. And like, because she's a child, I'm not entirely confident that if they didn't I'm not entirely confident she couldn't be forced into doing it, particularly if they were able to nab her father as well and use her father as the carrot leading the mule, to use an in-book metaphor. So, I don't know, man. There's a lot of stuff in this book that can be, like, broken down. So, I'm trying to hit at least all the high points. There's just so much to be said about it. It's such a fascinating experience. The fact that the shop is able to find them as quickly as they are is so frustrating. Because there's some points where you're like, man, it's gotta take them at least like a couple of days to pick the trail back up, and it takes like maybe a day max, and you're like, shit. It's like, oh no, we missed them staying at that motel. They must have hitchhiked, and it was like, wait a minute, didn't we see a truck go by? And they're able to like find the truck, and that's how they find them at Irvin Norma's, which is extremely frustrating. Because you really think they've earned like a moment of reprieve. And then basically, it's just, nope, we're here. Just, oh my god. I love that as a plot device, but I hate that for the main characters. So, they do a little bit of traveling in the book, though. I forget exactly what town they start in, but they're in Albany for a brief moment, they're in Glen Hastings for a little bit, they're in Vermont for a while. The shop, I think, is in Eastern Virginia. So, that's part of the reason getting back to Irvin Norma is so hard, because the shop is in Eastern Virginia, and I think Irvin Norma are somewhere in New York, or something like that. So, like, just imagine an 8-year-old somehow doing that on her own, right? Like, that's insane, right? Like, that's insane. So, it's just such a fascinating concept in general. Like, what if you had a kid, and that kid had superpowers, but, like, not in the cool, fun Marvel way? Like, not in the, like, neat, like, I don't know, Doctor Strange, oh, I can do magic, or whatever. Like, they put it very aptly in the book where they call the abilities a curse a few times. And while on one hand you kind of want to be like, no, it's a part of you, it's not a curse, it's just a part of you. At the same time, their lives would have been so much easier if they didn't have powers, if Charlie didn't have powers. Like, it does really fuck up their lives. More so because other people want to take advantage of it, of course, rather than necessarily because they've done anything wrong. But, like, the point stands regardless. Of, like, if they hadn't been interested in Charlie and what she could do, they would have no reason to nab her. It would be a non-issue. Versus, of course, Firestarter, where she does have these powers, and they end up nabbing her. The theory, via Andy McGee, is that they saw her not come home for a few days, and they thought that they were trying to hide Charlie, when in reality Charlie was just staying at a friend's house for a couple of days. So then they nab her, and Andy pursues and is able to find them at a rest stop. Sorry, there's something on my arm. That's really bothering me. Okay. And Andy uses the push to get them back. He uses the push to knock one of them out. Basically puts him to sleep, and does it so hard that anytime someone says the word sleep to him after that, he knocks out for like the better part of a day, if not a day. And then he basically pushes the other guy into believing that he's blind, and he goes blind, and that's how he gets his fucking kid back from the shop. Which is just insane. I don't know. I think it's really cool, like in a like a writer perspective kind of way, but like it's kind of horrifying, because then Andy proceeds to go around to everyone at the rest stop that like had seen something and kind of use the push to dissuade them into like calmness and make them think that nothing was going on. So it's wild, because the power hurts him to use, but he arguably has a lot of power if used correctly. So, And then his daughter, of course, is just the powerhouse. Just like, she starts having a nightmare in her sleep, and her bedroom starts heating up in her sleep. And it's wild, guys. It's very cool and very wild. It's such a neat sequence, but also holy shit. Excuse me. So, it's very cool. It's very much a book where you kind of read it and you're like, oh, that's fucked up, but oh, that's neat. But oh, that's fucked up. like the whole sequence where she takes the shop out is nuts. But also, oh my god, multiple people died and were injured. Is the big guy if she was in a 5-man band? I'm not sure I understand, Aya. Let me find the end sequence to read to you guys. So her father dies, and we get a short sequence of the perspective of the men outside who are shooting the escaping horses because they're freaked the fuck out. And then you kind of have this moment where you go back to Charlie.
Ooh.
Thanks, Don. So, let me get a swig of water and then I'll read the sequence. It is water. It is black cherry, clear American, flavored sparkling water. Oh, as in like, yeah. As in like she's tiny but she's the powerhouse of the group. Yeah, like Toph. No, that's correct. What? Yeah, it's like sparkling water. This one over here. He's playing Lost Ark, he's not paying attention. That one got me into drinking them a couple years back. Hey, Dad. You can also say hi in chat. Technicalities? I mean, you're right, but I also did call it water, which is technically correct. Which is, as this one would say, the best kind of correct. Are we doing the thing? We're doing the thing, aren't we? Did you just say that in chat? You did? Good. Anyway, I'm gonna read this sequence where Charlie takes out like the entire shop. Charlie was submerged in the power again, and it was a relief. The loss of her father, as keen and sharp as a stiletto, receded and became no more than a numb ache. As always, the power drew her like some fascinating and awful toy whose full range of possibilities still awaited discovery. Trenches of fire raced across the grass and towards the ragged line of men. You killed the horses, you bastards, she thought, and her father's voice echoed as if in agreement. If you have to kill the ones in your way, Charlie, do it. It's a war. Make them know they've been in a war. Yes, she decided. She would make them know they had been in a war. Some of the men were breaking and running now. She skewed one of the lines of fire to the right with a mild twist of her head, and 3 of them were engulfed, their clothes becoming so many flaming rags. They fell to the ground, convulsed and screaming. Something buzzed by her head, and something else printed a thin fire across her wrist. It was Jules, who had got another gun from Richard's station. He stood there, legs spread, gun out, shooting at her. Charlie pushed out at him, one hard, pumping bolt of force. Jules was thrown back so suddenly and with such force that the wrecking ball of a great invisible crane might have struck him. He flew 40 feet, not a man anymore, but a boiling ball of fire. Then they all broke and ran. They ran the way they had run at the Manders farm. That's the farm sequence I read to y'all before. Good thing, she thought. Good thing for you. She did not want to kill people. That had not changed. What had changed was that she'd kill them if she had to, if they stood in her way. She began to walk towards the nearer of the two houses, which stood a little distance in front of a barn as perfect as a picture on a country calendar and facing its mate across the expanse of lawn. Windows broke like gunshots. The ivy trellis climbing either side of the house shuddered and then burst into arteries of fire. The paint smoked, then bubbled, then flamed. Fire ran up onto the roof like grasping hands. One of the doors burst open, letting out the whooping, panicked bray of a fire alarm and 24 secretaries, technicians, and analysts. They ran across the lawn towards the fence, veered away from the deaths of electricity and yapping, leaping dogs, and then milled like frightened sheep. The power wanted to go out towards them, but she turned it away from them and onto the fence itself, making the neat chain-link diamonds droop and run and weep molten metal tears. There was a low thrumming sound, a low-key zapping sound as the fence overloaded and then began to short out in segment after segment. Blinding purple sparks leapt up. Small fireballs began to jump from the top of the fence, and white porcelain conductors exploded like clay ducks in a shooting gallery. There are these guard dogs, and they start going absolutely mad. One of them runs straight into the fence, which, oof, what a rough way to go. There was no barn behind the house where Charlie and her father had been held, but there was a long, low, perfectly maintained building that was also red barn board trimmed with white. This building housed the shop motor pool. Now the wide doors burst open and an armored Cadillac limousine with government plates raced out. The sunroof was open and a man's head and torso poked through it. Elbows braced on the roof, he began to fire a light submachine gun at Charlie. In front of her, firm turf spun away in ragged digs and divots. Charlie turned towards the car and let the power loose in that direction. The power was still growing. It was turning into something that was lithe yet ponderous, an invisible something that now seemed to be feeding itself in a spiraling chain reaction of exponential force. The limo's gas tank exploded, enveloping the rear of the car and shooting the tailpipe into the sky like a javelin. But even before that happened, the head and torso of the shooter were incinerated. The car's windshield blown in, and the limousine's special self-sealing tires had begun to run like tallow. The car continued on through its own ring of fire, plowing out of control, losing its original shape, melting into something that looked like a torpedo. It rolled over twice, and a second explosion shook it. Secretaries were fleeing from the other house now, running like ants. She could have swept them with fire, and a part of her wanted to. But with an effort of her waning volition, she turned the power on the house itself, the house where the two of them had been kept against their will, and the house where John had betrayed her. She sent the force out, all of it. For just a moment it seemed nothing at all was happening. There was a faint shimmer in the air, like the shimmer above a barbecue pit where the coals have been well banked. And then the entire house exploded. The only clear image she was left with, and later the testimony of the survivors repeated it several times, was that of the chimney of the house rising into the sky like a brick rocket ship seemingly intact, while beneath it the 25-room house disintegrated like a little girl's cardboard playhouse in the flame of a blowtorch. Stone, lengths of board, planks rose into the air and flew away on the hot dragon breath of Charlie's force. An IBM typewriter melted and twisted into something that looked like a green steel dish rag, tied in a knot, whirled up into the sky and crashed down between the two fences, digging a crater. A secretary's chair, the swivel seat whirling madly, was flung out of sight with the speed of a bolt shot from a crossbow. There was one. So then, basically, she's looking around, and there's this concern where the power is spinning and spinning and spinning and wants to be sent out, needing to go somewhere, or else it can potentially come back on Charlie and kill her. Let's see here. Yes, so she ends up, this is the sequence I was talking to y'all about, where she directs it towards the duck pond. So she starts feeding it into the duck pond, it starts losing some of its urgency, and it starts to finally kind of back off. Let's see here. Yeah, the power was still growing. This act of destruction, this apocalypse had only approached its current limit. The potential had hardly been tapped. which is just, like, wild to think about, right? She even says, like, she almost burned up the whole pond, trying to regain control. Only puddles of water remained, flatly sheened with sunlight like bright glass gems set in the slick mud of the pond's bottom. Draggled lily pads and water weeds lay there like corroded jewelry, already in places the mud was beginning to dry and crack. She saw a few coins in the mud and a rusted thing that looked like a very long knife or perhaps a lawnmower blade. The grass all along the pond had been scorched black. So, like, that's how close that she had come to losing control completely and potentially even killing herself in the aftermath. Like, this sequence is truly terrifying, and I love really just experiencing it as someone who had never read the book before. I think it's a fascinating read. Also, thank you, Dawn. I did see that. 1415 Gun Lancer, let's go! Are you gonna do Vaulton tonight? Okay, I was just curious. Monster Hunter would also be fun. But it's such a, like, telling sequence of just how desperate she is and how like she becomes someone who just is willing to do what she has to do because she's just so tired. Yeah, she is. So the way the sequence, I actually did look at the timeline for how old she is. At the beginning of the book, she's 7. When they are hiding out on her great-grandfather's farm, she turns 8. So she is 8 during the sequence I just read, and then she turns 9 when she is staying with Irv and Norma. So by the time we get to the end of the book, and she is going to see the Rolling Stones writer, she is 9. But in this sequence, she is still 8. And just, I don't know, the line that always grabs me every time I look back at that passage is, this had just started to reach the power's current limit. The potential has not been touched. It's going to get stronger. And it almost makes you both afraid for her and almost afraid of her. Not necessarily because I think she's this terrible person who will pull out the power whenever she wants something, but because, like, what if it does grow to a level where she can no longer control it and it just comes out as it wills? Like, what if she ends up burning herself up because she can't keep it under wraps? And we don't know. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that I love the idea of a sequel for this book. I don't know where it would go, though. It's like, I would love to see the aftermath of what happens to Charlie. But at the same time, it's potentially better that we don't know, because her prognosis for her life is, like, not great, you know? Like, her chances are not super good to have, like, a happy life. She's gonna need so much therapy, and that's only if she can even find a therapist that believes her and doesn't report her to God knows who. She needs someone to stay with because she can't stay by herself at this juncture. She's a child. So it's like, yeah, she goes to the Rolling Stones, but, like, does she go back to Irv and Norma after that? Or does she go somewhere else? Does she try to make it on her own? Does it even work if she does? Because she just doesn't know how to take care of herself in the way that, like, I don't know, an adult would, because she's 9 at the end of this book. So, like, of course she doesn't have the capacity to, like, take care of herself in all things. Why would she? That would be insane. I hear the cat. Where did she go? There you are. Hi, baby. Oof. Hey, sweetheart. I'd ask if you want to say hi to stream, but you are investigating a box right now, so I will not pick you up. I love you. Do not grab me. That would hurt. You are sharp. She wants to mess real bad with the box that the chair came in, but like I said earlier, we put a bunch of trash in it, so she needs to not do that. We need to do a trash run in general. The Aftermath likely would be unhappy and potentially end up tied to Dark Tower shenanigans. Interesting. So Dark Tower is a bit of Stephen King that I haven't actually delved into before. But a lot of his stuff is kind of subtly connected. Just in the sense of like a lot of the things that happen are in like towns that are adjacent to real. Oh, there's the kitty. Hello, baby. Some of the stuff happens in like made up towns, but like a lot of it happens in New England, so sometimes those things kind of brush against each other. So I would be interested to see how this gets connected to Dark Tower, just given that I know little to nothing about Dark Tower. But you're absolutely right, the Aftermath likely would be unhappy. Like, I am extremely interested in what would happen to her, but like, I think the likelihood of it being something good is not extremely high. Like, what is she supposed to do? Where's she supposed to go? Is there anywhere she can go that doesn't just endanger everyone around her, you know? So, it's kind of rough in that way. Existing as part of a Dark Tower storyline sounds like a wholly unpleasant experience. I mean, probably. Like I said, that's a series I have not read yet. Hello, baby. It is on my to-be-read list. It's just several books, so I haven't started in on it yet. Lots of stuff to read, y'all. My to-be-read list is very long. And it's kind of all over the place. But like a great example of like things being connected is in Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, and End of Watch. There's a character named Holly Gibney. She's an assistant to a PI-esque character. His job title changes a few times over the books, and I don't remember exactly what it is. But she actually makes an appearance for anyone who's read The Outsider. That is the same Holly Gibney. Which is really cool, because she's a really cool character. And she's kind of able to help everybody get on track to what's going on in The Outsider. Oh, no, no, no. I love you. No. Thank you, honey. You're very sweet. What are you doing? Stop. Here. There you go. Even if she gets a happy period, Carrie literally turns 10 years after this book would definitely cause fear-mongering for her abilities. Okay, I actually didn't know the timeline of all of that. I obviously know what Carrie is, but I don't know, like, when that happens timeline-wise. But yeah, like, especially because I believe Carrie also takes place in the northeastern United States. If she's even able to survive to that point, which, like, truly, who fucking knows, Carrie would probably happen, and assuming it's all a connected universe, right? Which is, like, sometimes true, but sometimes not as true. Like, even if she were able, like, unless she were able to totally ditch who she is, like, if she was able to get a different identity or something, I think that would eventually come back on her, particularly if you're presuming that Carrie happens in the same timeline. A lot of King does happen in the northeastern United States, you are correct. The Talisman is an interesting exception to that. This book is a little bit of an exception because, like I said before, we do spend some time in eastern Virginia, which is definitely not the Northeast, as someone who lives in Virginia. The Talisman actually takes you coast to coast, as far as the United States goes. I don't remember exactly what town that book starts in, but they go all the way to California and back in that book. But King also has spent, whatever, a lot of his life in northeastern America, so I think that just has a lot to do with it. Write what you know, that kind of deal. So a lot of the towns he makes up are, like, fake, or, like, tangents of real-life towns, or something. Or, like, they're very briefly, very briefly in Albany in this book, in New York. So there's some like droppings of real names in there, along with the like fantastical towns and things. But before I start going off on another tangent, is there anything else y'all want to get into with this book that I have not said yet? Because I definitely want to make sure I cover all the bases while we're here, because that is, you know, the point of a book club. So I'm just checking on something while y'all are thinking that over. Okay. Oof, that's a rough visual, yeah. Sorry, nothing, I'm just talking to myself. But no, yeah, like if there was anything y'all wanted to talk about with this book, please do. I don't actually know how many of you have read it. I never asked. I know Aya said this was a reread for her. And I know Swift, I know you've read a little bit of King. I don't know what you haven't read of him. So I still can't believe this book escaped my radar for as long as it did. It is really funny because, you know, King obviously is praised for being a horror writer, and while I don't think that's necessarily untrue, I don't know that this book falls into the horror genre. Like, I just don't. I think it's fiction, borderline like a fantasy type of deal. Not quite like urban fantasy. That's not really where I'm trying to go. But it's just kind of a thing that's set in the real world, quote unquote. And it's dark and it's intense, but I wouldn't call it excuse me. There are a few sequences that you could argue dip into the horror category, but I don't think it's ultimately a horror book. Not the way like The Shining is, right? Or like you could argue Christine is maybe a bit more horror based, even though Christine is honestly not one of my favorites that he's done. But like, it's interesting because it's like horror but not. Yeah, it is probably like a weird subgenre combo. Like, it's probably fiction / fantasy / thriller horror? Man. Do not go for my feet. That is rude. Without being horror, you are in a world where people can commit acts of unspeakable evil. Yeah. No, that's dead on. It's like, it's not horror in the sense of like, oh, there's Michael Myers, or there's Freddy Krueger, or like, oh, there's a ghost, or a poltergeist, or whatever you want to call it. What are you doing? What are you doing? Come up here. Come chill. Please. No. Chill, please. I love you. But no, you're absolutely dead on. Is like, there's no like monster in the conventional sense of like a manticore or a ghost or a, I don't know. There's no like beast. It's just a couple of people with a touch of fiction in them, and then other people who just do horrible things, because sometimes people do horrible things. So it's a really interesting way of doing that, I think, because it's not fantasy. It is fiction, of course, but like it almost hangs out in like the fiction thriller area a little bit. So, but like it's not like The Shining, right? It's not like, oh, this place is like haunted or whatever. It's nothing like that. So I think it's fascinating. Truly, if y'all are readers and you have not read this book, even though we've talked about most of the plot, I would say still read it. Because I did not go over everything. Because I can't. I cannot physically handle all of it. So it's like there's a whole sequence where Andy like ditches his drugs, and like I didn't talk about that at all. There's a whole bit with a taxi driver, and I didn't touch on that at all. Like, I'm obviously not going to go through all of the minute plot points because I want you to read the book if you haven't. But yeah, like if you are a reader, even if you've never read King, give it a shot. Pick up Firestarter. If you've listened to this plot and you maybe are not interested in this one, I'd be more than happy to help you find another one of his. Or just another book in general. Like maybe you didn't like this, but you'll like Poppy War next month. I know very little about that book, to be honest. Because that's a recommendation from Leafspring. You could do a movie-length analysis on this, but still miss things. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's why, like, I want to watch the film, but I really have no concept of whether or not the film will be good, just because I think it's impossible to fit in all of the great details that are in this into a movie that's, like, a reasonable length, right? Like, I don't think that works. I really don't. It's not gonna happen. So... Sorry about that. Still ditching a cough, as you can see. But yeah, no, that's most of what I have to say about Firestarter. That covers all my notes, at least. So, like I said, if y'all have other thoughts on it, please say something now. If y'all maybe haven't read the book now, but want to later or something, we do have a Discord channel in the Discord server called just Book Club. And it is for this. It is for continued discussion on any of the books we talk about in Book Club. It is for discussion on really anything you're reading. We were talking about the Dresden Files in there like a week or two ago. The cat is attacking my feet again. I wish she would stop. Stop. But no, it's really just a whole channel for book nerds, because I am one. No. There's a channel for books, there's a channel for movies and TV, there's a channel for music. So, there's all kinds of stuff in there. So if you are not in the Discord, and you would like to be, hit ! Discord, like I have over on the right, and there's a link that should invite you to the server. Having said that, unless y'all have something else to add, I may go ahead and raid out. I know it's a little early. I just don't necessarily want to drone on and on about points I've already made about the book. So I am perfectly happy to do that, unless y'all have further thoughts about Firestarter that you'd like to get into. So let me know about that while I look at people who are alive. Ooh. People are streaming Stray, that new cat game. That game is so cute. I don't know if I'll play it on stream, but I do really like it. Or what I've seen of it. I haven't seen the whole thing because I kind of want to play it. I want it so bad, dude. Me too. If you end up getting it, you'll have to let me know how much fun it is so that I can be jealous. Alright, here. So sorry. I haven't talked this much in a while and my throat's not real happy with me, apparently. So, it looks like out of everyone I've got on my feed, the best person to raid may actually just be a Miss Bravo Becca again. I know we raided her on Wednesday, but it is her first week back to streaming, which is extremely exciting. Both for her and for me, because I've missed her streams. So, oh good, they're playing Jackbox. Oh, excellent. I love that for her. Cute, cute, cute. Alright. So, like I said, I know it's a bit early. We got to see the Flower Crown gains last time. We did. Tonight is Jackbox, so there will be no Flower Crown. I know that Becca usually does Elden Ring on Wednesdays, so that would be the time to see that, I think. But I will go ahead and probably start the raid here shortly. Go ahead and throw the links here. If you are interested in being a part of my social media or following any of my social media and you are not, there is a link tree there in the chat. There's also a YouTube backlog, as well as the Discord that I put before. And I don't think I'm missing something. I hope I'm not missing something. What's with? But no, I like doing book club with y'all. Hopefully y'all like doing book club with me. Like I said, it's, as I always say, nothing that I do on stream is ever a requirement. It's just more fun when y'all come and hang out and talk about the book with me, you know? So, I'm gonna hit that /raid. Bravo. Becca. Alright. So, as always, I ask y'all to give her the same love and respect that y'all always give me, because she is a lovely human and we love her very much, and I am trusting her with you and you with her. So, I will see y'all on Monday for some more Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, and we will hopefully suck less at the card system. We'll see. But either way, y'all can hang out with me in Discord over the weekend, but I will see y'all Monday, and I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. I totally forgot, but make sure you grab one of these commands so that we can do the raid messages. If you want them in italics, you just have to write /me, and then say whatever you want to say. So, we will raid now.